The scream was still hanging in the air when Judge Judy lifted her eyes. "Sit down." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The bailiffs wedged themselves between Tiffany and Marissa, arms outstretched, palms firm against silk blouses and diamond bracelets. A heel snapped against the courtroom tile. Someone in the audience whispered, "Oh my God," as a phone skidded beneath the plaintiff's table, still recording. The camera would later slow this moment down for millions online, but inside the courtroom, everything was sharp and immediate. Tiffany's chest heaved, mascara threatening to run. Marissa's jaw was tight, nostrils flared, her designer blazer twisted from the scuffle. They looked less like businesswomen and more like former best friends who had just detonated something years in the making. Judge Judy didn't stand, she didn't shout, she simply watched, and that silence, that cold, evaluative stare, did more to stop the chaos than the bailiff's grip ever could. "Is this a courtroom?" she asked evenly, "or a playground?" The room fell into a strained hush. Even the air conditioning seemed too quiet. The case, as introduced moments earlier, sounded deceptively simple, a $25,000 dispute over a dissolved skincare startup. Tiffany claimed she co-founded the brand. Marissa insisted Tiffany was nothing more than a marketing helper who overestimated her role. But the venom in their eyes told a different story. This wasn't just about money, it was about erasure. Tiffany straightened first, smoothing her skirt with shaking hands. "She stole everything," she said, voice cracking but steadying with each word. "The brand, the clients, the social media. She locked me out overnight." Marissa let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You mean I protected my company from someone unstable?" A ripple went through the audience. Judge Judy's gaze snapped to Marissa. "Careful." The camera would later cut to a close-up of Tiffany's reaction, stunned, wounded, furious. But right now her fingers were gripping the edge of the podium as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "We built it together," Tiffany insisted. "Every formula, every launch, I put in my savings." "And whose name," Judge Judy interrupted calmly, flipping open the case file, "is on the LLC?" The paper made a crisp sound as it turned. Marissa's chin lifted half an inch. "Mine." The word landed like a dropped glass. Tiffany blinked. "That's because she filed it without telling me." Judge Judy raised a hand. Silence again. Her eyes moved slowly from one woman to the other, measuring, weighing. Not the emotion, the facts. "So," she said, voice low and deliberate, "we have a friendship, no written agreement, and $25,000 that's apparently vanished into thin air." The audience leaned forward. "And you," she said, fixing Tiffany with a pointed look, "trusted this entire operation to a handshake?" Tiffany opened her mouth, hesitated, and in that flicker of uncertainty, something shifted. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair. "Let's start with something simple," she said. "Who owns the trademark?" The word trademark lingered in the air like smoke. Tiffany's lips parted, but no sound came out. Marissa didn't hesitate. She reached into her leather folder with deliberate calm, pulling out a stack of papers clipped neatly together. The movement was slow, practiced, controlled. "I do," she said, stepping forward. "Registered 18 months ago." The papers landed on the judge's desk with a flat, confident slap. The camera zoomed in. United States Patent and Trademark Office. Serial number, filing date. One name listed under owner, Marissa Kane. A faint smile curved at the edge of her mouth. Tiffany stared at the document like it had betrayed her personally. "We agreed," she started. Judge Judy lifted a finger. "Agreements," she said coolly, "belong on paper." The audience murmured again. A close-up caught Tiffany swallowing hard, the realization settling in. She had trusted a conversation, a shared dream. Late nights mixing formulas in her kitchen while Marissa handled the boring paperwork, or so she thought. "I didn't know she filed it alone," Tiffany said, voice thinner now. "We were partners." "Partners," Marissa echoed, tilting her head. "In spirit, maybe. Not legally." The words were surgical. Judge Judy flipped through the pages slowly, methodically. The sound of paper turning seemed louder than it should have been. The lighting above cast a stark white glow across the bench. sharpening every shadow on both women's faces. "When exactly did you file this?" Judge Judy asked. "After our first investor meeting," Marissa replied smoothly. "To protect the brand." "To protect it from who?" Tiffany shot back. Marissa didn't look at her. "From confusion." The camera caught Tiffany's hands trembling. Judge Judy set the trademark papers down and leaned forward. "Miss Tiffany, did you ever check the public filings for this company?" Silence. The question wasn't accusatory, it was surgical. Tiffany blinked. "I didn't think I had to." "And that," Judge Judy said, voice steady but edged with steel, "is how people lose businesses." A subtle shift passed through the room. The power dynamic tilted, just slightly, in Marissa's favor. But then, Tiffany reached into her own folder, movements less polished but urgent. She pulled out bank statements, highlighted in yellow. Transfers, deposits, equipment purchases. "I paid for the lab supplies," she said quickly. "The first production batch, the website designer. It came out of my personal savings." Judge Judy glanced at the numbers. $22,000. "Yes." Marissa crossed her arms. "Voluntary contributions." "Investments," Tiffany corrected, heat rising again. Judge Judy held up both hands before it escalated. "Stop." The words snapped like a wire. She studied both women carefully now. Not just the documents, their posture, their breathing, the way their eyes refused to meet. "Here's what concerns me," she said slowly. "You," she nodded to Marissa, "secured the name." Then she turned to Tiffany. "And you secured the money." The tension thickened. One owned the image, the other funded the dream. Judge Judy's gaze sharpened. "So tell me," she said quietly, "when did this partnership stop being equal?" The question didn't get answered. It cracked something instead. Tiffany let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "It stopped being equal," she said slowly, "when she started making decisions without me." Marissa's expression hardened. "That's not true." "Oh, it is," Tiffany shot back. "You just didn't think I'd find out." Judge Judy leaned back slightly, hands folded. She didn't interrupt this time. Sometimes, silence pulled more truth than pressure ever could. "How did you two meet?" she asked evenly. The shift in direction caught them both off guard. Tiffany blinked first. "College," she said. "Marketing class. We ended up roommates." Marissa nodded stiffly. "We were close." The camera would later cut to a wide shot. Two women standing on opposite sides of the courtroom, once inseparable, now divided by polished wood and pride. "We talked about starting something together for years," Tiffany continued. "Natural skincare, clean ingredients, no chemicals. We tested formulas in my apartment." "And who suggested we monetize it?" Marissa interjected. "Me." "You suggested branding," Tiffany corrected. "I built the product." Their words overlapped now. No longer polished statements, but fragments of a shared past unraveling in real time. Judge Judy raised a hand. "One at a time." The air felt heavier. Tiffany reached into her folder again, this time pulling out printed screenshots, text messages, dozens of them. She handed them to the bailiff, who delivered them to the bench. "Read the highlighted parts," Tiffany said quietly. Judge Judy adjusted her glasses and scanned the page. The camera would later zoom in. "You're overstepping. This is my company to protect. If you can't handle it, step aside." Marissa shifted uncomfortably. "That was during a stressful launch." "Stress doesn't rewrite history," Judge Judy replied calmly. Another message caught her eye. "You'll regret this when the truth comes out." Judge Judy looked up. "What truth?" she asked. The room stilled. Tiffany's eyes flickered toward Marissa, not angry this time, but wounded. "She told investors I was unstable," Tiffany said, "that I wasn't reliable." "I said you were emotional," Marissa snapped. "Because you were." The word emotional echoed. Judge Judy's gaze sharpened. "Meaning?" Marissa hesitated, just long enough for doubt to surface. "Meaning she took everything personally," she said finally. The The camera caught Tiffany's hands tightening around the podium again. "I took it personally," Tiffany whispered, "because it was personal." A beat of silence followed. Judge Judy closed the folder slowly. "Friendships," she said, voice steady and deliberate, "don't collapse over money alone." Her eyes lifted. They collapse over trust. The courtroom seemed to exhale, and just as the tension threatened to plateau, Tiffany reached for something else in her bag. "I didn't want to bring this," she said, "but I have to." Marissa's composure flickered for the first time. "What is that?" she demanded. Tiffany didn't answer. She simply held up a small black device, and the courtroom leaned forward. The device in Tiffany's hand was small, unassuming. But Marissa's reaction wasn't. Her shoulders stiffened. Her composure, that polished influencer-perfect calm, fractured just slightly at the edges. "What is that?" she asked again, sharper this time. Tiffany didn't look at her. She looked at the judge. "It's a recording," she said quietly, "from our last private meeting." The courtroom inhaled as one. Marissa let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You recorded me?" Judge Judy didn't react to the accusation. Her eyes stayed on Tiffany. "You're telling me you recorded a conversation without her knowledge?" "Yes." "And why?" Judge Judy asked, voice measured. "Would you feel the need to do that?" "Because I didn't trust her anymore." The words hovered there before Tiffany even spoke them. "She'd already changed the passwords," Tiffany said, "locked me out of the company accounts, told me I was too emotional to handle investor calls. I needed proof of what she was planning." Marissa stepped forward despite the bailiff's subtle shift in stance. "Planning? I was cleaning up a mess." Judge Judy's head tilted. "What mess?" "The instability," Marissa said quickly. "She'd cry during meetings. She couldn't separate business from feelings." Tiffany's jaw tightened, but she didn't interrupt. Judge Judy's gaze sharpened. "Grief is not instability," she said quietly, as if testing the word before fully committing to it. Marissa froze for half a second. Too long. The camera caught it. That flicker, that hesitation. "You knew her father had just passed," Judge Judy continued calmly. "Correct?" Marissa's mouth opened, then closed. "That's not relevant to the trademark." "It's relevant to motive," Judge Judy replied. Silence again. Tiffany's fingers tightened around the small device. "She told me I was becoming a liability," she said. "That investors preferred one clear leader." Marissa's chin lifted defensively. "They did." "And you decided that leader should be you," Judge Judy said. "I founded the company legally." "You filed paperwork," Judge Judy corrected. "There's a difference." The air shifted. Marissa's posture, once straight and assured, now seemed slightly rigid, defensive rather than dominant. Judge Judy gestured toward the device in Tiffany's hand. "What exactly is on that recording?" Tiffany swallowed. "A conversation where she explains why she needed to phase me out." The words landed heavily. Marissa's voice rose, panic edging in. "You can't use that without my consent." "This is arbitration," Judge Judy replied evenly. "Not a criminal proceeding. If it's relevant, I'll consider it." The lighting above seemed harsher now, casting sharper shadows under Marissa's eyes. For the first time since the case began, her confidence looked performative. "Play it," Judge Judy said. Tiffany's thumb hovered over the button. Marissa's breathing quickened, barely noticeable, but there. The room leaned forward. And as Tiffany pressed play, the faint crackle of audio filled the courtroom, just before a familiar voice began to speak. The echo of the recording hadn't fully faded when Judge Judy leaned forward. The courtroom was quieter now, not calm, just heavier. Marissa's own recorded voice still seemed to linger in the air. "I had to separate myself before she dragged the company down with her emotions." Tiffany hadn't smiled when it played. She hadn't looked triumphant. She just stood there, like someone hearing confirmation of a suspicion they'd prayed was wrong. Judge Judy removed her glasses slowly. "Miss Marissa," she said, voice low and deliberate. "Is that your voice?" Marissa swallowed. "Yes, but it's taken out of context." "Then give me the context." A beat. Marissa shifted her weight. I was under pressure. Investors wanted stability. Tiffany was unpredictable, crying in meetings, questioning decisions in front of people. Tiffany's head snapped up. Because you were rewriting our agreement. There was no agreement, Marissa shot back. The tension spiked again, sharp and electric. Judge Judy's gavel struck once, not loud, just precise. Control yourselves. Silence snapped into place. Judge Judy turned her gaze to Tiffany. Did you sabotage investor meetings? No, Tiffany answered immediately. I asked questions about profit splits, about branding direction, about transparency. And that, Marissa cut in bitterly, is not what investors want to hear. Judge Judy's eyes flicked back to Marissa. Investors, she said evenly, want honesty. The camera caught Marissa's jaw tightening. What I see, Judge Judy continued, is not a business collapse. I see a power struggle. Neither woman spoke. You, she nodded toward Tiffany, trusted loyalty over paperwork. Then she turned to Marissa. And you trusted paperwork over loyalty. The words landed with weight. Marissa crossed her arms. This isn't about ego, it's about protecting what I built. Tiffany laughed softly, a sound edged with disbelief. We built it. Judge Judy raised a brow. Who created the actual product? The question cut clean through the noise. Tiffany blinked. I did. The formulas, the testing. I worked directly with the lab. Marissa shook her head. You experimented. I professionalized it. Did you formulate it? Judge Judy pressed. No. Did you hire the chemist? Yes. Who communicated with the chemist weekly? Silence. The camera zoomed in on Marissa's face. Tiffany's voice was quieter now, not angry, just tired. I have the emails. A ripple moved through the audience. Judge Judy folded her hands again, studying them both with a kind of restrained intensity. This, she said slowly, is what happens when partnership turns into possession. Marissa exhaled sharply. She would have ruined it. And you decided that alone? Judge Judy asked. Another silence. The lighting above seemed colder now, less flattering. Ego had entered the room wearing confidence. Now it stood under oath. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. Before I decide anything, she said, I want clarity on one point. Her eyes locked onto Tiffany, who actually created the formula. The question lingered like a blade suspended mid-air. Who actually created the formula? Tiffany didn't hesitate this time. I did. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the steadiness of someone who had replayed this truth 100 times in her own head. Marissa exhaled sharply through her nose. She mixed ingredients in her kitchen. That doesn't make her a chemist. I never claimed to be one, Tiffany replied. I developed the base formulation. I worked with the lab to stabilize it. Judge Judy's eyes shifted between them, measuring tone as much as words. Proof, she said simply. Tiffany stepped forward, sliding a printed email chain across the podium. The bailiff delivered it to the bench. The camera would later zoom in on the subject lines. Revision, 3, lavender base adjustment pH, balance, confirmation batch, stability results. Urgent all, addressed directly to Tiffany. Judge Judy skimmed quickly, then slowed. These are from the manufacturing lab? Yes, Tiffany answered. I was the primary contact. Marissa's composure thinned another layer. Because I was handling branding and investor outreach, Judge Judy didn't look up. The chemist refers to you, she said to Tiffany, tapping the page lightly, as the creative director and product originator. Silence. The audience shifted in their seats. Marissa stepped in quickly. Titles and emails don't define ownership. No, Judge Judy replied evenly, but they define contribution. The lighting seemed harsher now, less forgiving. The polish on Marissa's image, the poised CEO persona, was starting to dull under scrutiny. Tiffany pulled another document from her folder. There's more. She handed over invoices, lab payments made from her personal account. Judge Judy's brow lifted slightly. These aren't reimbursed. No, Tiffany said. I was told we'd reconcile once revenue came in. Marissa's jaw clenched. We reinvested everything. Into an account I didn't have access to. Tiffany countered. The tension tightened again, but this time it felt less explosive, more surgical, controlled. Judge Judy leaned back slowly. "So let me understand," she said, voice calm but deliberate. "You," she nodded to Tiffany, "developed the formula, communicated with the lab, and paid initial production costs." She turned to Marissa. "And you registered the company and trademark in your name?" "Yes." The word sounded smaller now. Judge Judy folded her hands. "Did you ever put her name on any ownership document?" Marissa hesitated. "No." A quiet murmur rippled through the room. The camera caught Tiffany's face, not smug, not victorious, just weary, as if hearing that confirmation out loud hurt more than she expected. Judge Judy's gaze narrowed slightly. "Miss Marissa," she said, "when you pitched this product to investors, how did you describe its origin?" Marissa blinked. "As my company." The words hung there. Judge Judy tilted her head ever so slightly. "And the formula?" Another pause. The room felt smaller somehow. Marissa's confidence flickered. "That," she said carefully, "was collaborative." Judge Judy didn't smile, but her eyes sharpened. "Interesting," she said quietly, because at that very moment, the court clerk stepped forward. "There's a written statement from the chemist," she announced. And suddenly, the room shifted again. The paper trembled slightly in the clerk's hand. A written statement from Dr. Alan Reeves, head chemist at Pure Labs Manufacturing. Every eye in the courtroom shifted toward Judge Judy. Marissa's posture stiffened again, but this time it wasn't confidence, it was calculation. Her fingers gripped the edge of the defense table just a little too tightly. Judge Judy nodded. "Read it." The clerk cleared her throat. "To whom it may concern, Tiffany Cole was the primary creative contact during product development. She provided the original base formulation and directed all revisions. My understanding was that she was co-owner or founder of the brand." A pause. The air changed. Marissa's face drained of color. Not dramatically, not theatrically, but enough. The clerk continued. "At no point was I informed that her role had changed or diminished. In fact, she expressed concern about being excluded from final distribution decisions." A low murmur rippled through the audience. The camera would later capture Tiffany closing her eyes, not in triumph, but in something closer to validation. The kind that comes too late. Judge Judy folded the paper slowly. "Miss Marissa," she said, voice steady, "did you inform the chemist that Miss Tiffany was no longer involved?" Marissa swallowed. "It wasn't finalized yet." "That wasn't my question." "No," she said, barely audible. Judge Judy leaned forward. "So while you were registering trademarks solely under your name, while you were presenting the company to investors as your independent venture, the individual responsible for product creation was still operating under the assumption she was co-owner." Marissa's voice sharpened defensively. "Because she wouldn't have handled the transition well." "Transition?" Tiffany echoed softly. Judge Judy's eyes flashed. "You mean removal?" Silence. The lighting overhead seemed harsher now, flattening every expression. There was nowhere left for charm to hide. Marissa's breathing became visible in the rise and fall of her shoulders. "It was a business decision," she insisted. "I was thinking long-term." "And long-term," Judge Judy replied calmly, "did not include her." Tiffany didn't speak. She just watched. Judge Judy placed the statement down carefully, aligning it with the rest of the evidence like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. "This case," she said slowly, "has shifted." Marissa blinked. "Shifted how?" Judge Judy didn't answer immediately. She studied her, not angrily, not emotionally, but analytically. "Because now," she said, "we're not discussing a misunderstanding." Her voice lowered. "We're discussing intent." The word echoed heavier than any accusation so far. Marissa opened her mouth, perhaps to argue, perhaps to deflect. But for the first time since stepping into that courtroom, no polished sentence came out. Just air. The power she had wielded so confidently at the beginning, the paperwork, the trademark, the polished presentation, was slipping. And panic, quiet but unmistakable, was beginning to take its place. Judge Judy folded her hands. "We're going to talk about asset transfers," she said. Marissa's head snapped up, because somewhere in the paperwork, something much bigger was waiting. The word transfers changed the temperature in the room. Marissa's fingers tightened around the edge of the table, just slightly, just enough. Judge Judy didn't miss it. "Clerk," she said calmly, "bring me Exhibit D." A thin folder slid across the bench. Inside were bank records, clean columns of numbers, dates, and destinations. Cold, impersonal, unemotional, unlike the women standing before her. Judge Judy adjusted her glasses and began reading aloud. 3 weeks prior to this filing, 40% of company funds transferred to a newly formed LLC. She paused, registered under the name Claire Kane. Tiffany frowned. "Claire?" Marissa's jaw locked. "My sister," she said quickly. "She invested." Judge Judy didn't look up yet. "How much?" Silence stretched. "Did your sister invest a single dollar?" the judge asked again, voice even sharper now. Marissa hesitated, and that hesitation was louder than any answer. "No," she said finally. "Not directly." A murmur rippled through the audience. The camera would later zoom in on Tiffany's face, confusion giving way to realization. "You moved company money," Tiffany said slowly, "into your sister's name?" "It was strategic," Marissa snapped. "Future expansion planning." "Expansion," Judge Judy repeated calmly. "During an internal dispute." Marissa's breathing had changed. Faster now, less controlled. "It was a protective measure." "Protective from whom?" Judge Judy asked. The silence this time was heavy, because the answer was obvious. "Tiffany." Judge Judy leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable. "So," she said slowly, "while presenting this as a collaborative brand, while allowing Miss Tiffany to continue product development under the assumption of shared ownership, you were transferring operational assets to a separate entity controlled by your family." Marissa shook her head. It wasn't like that. The lighting above cast stark shadows under her eyes now. The polished CEO image had thinned to something more fragile. Tiffany's voice was quieter than before. "You were planning to replace me." Marissa didn't respond, and that silence confirmed more than words ever could. Judge Judy folded the documents neatly. "In my courtroom," she said calmly. "Timing is everything." She tapped the transfer date with the end of her pen. 2 weeks before you filed sole control of the trademark. Tap. 3 days before locking her out of company accounts. Tap. And 1 month before this dispute was formally filed. The rhythm was deliberate, unavoidable. Marissa's composure finally cracked, just enough for panic to show through. "It was business," she insisted weakly. "No," Judge Judy replied quietly. "It was preparation." The word landed harder than accusation. Preparation to isolate. Preparation to erase. Preparation to walk away clean. The audience felt it. Tiffany felt it. And for the first time since the case began, Marissa looked less like a CEO defending her brand, and more like someone cornered by her own paper trail. Judge Judy set the file down carefully. "We're not finished," she said. Because the deeper they dug, the less accidental this looked. The word preparation still echoed when Marissa finally snapped. "This is ridiculous," she said, voice no longer polished but frayed. "You're making it sound criminal." Judge Judy didn't blink. "I'm making it sound intentional." The distinction hung heavy. Marissa ran a hand through her hair, the first unguarded movement she'd made all day. The carefully constructed composure was beginning to slip, thread by thread. "You don't understand the pressure," she continued, speaking faster now. "Investors were questioning stability. They wanted one clear leader. They didn't want—" She stopped herself. "Didn't want what?" Judge Judy asked quietly. Tiffany's eyes were fixed on her. "Didn't want someone who couldn't handle stress," Marissa finished. A beat of silence. Tiffany's voice, when it came, was steady. "My father died 2 weeks before our investor roadshow." The courtroom shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. Marissa's gaze flickered, then hardened again. That doesn't change the fact that you were crying in meetings. I was grieving, Tiffany replied. Judge Judy's expression didn't soften, but it sharpened. And you, she said to Marissa, used that. Marissa's lips parted, ready to object, but nothing came out. Tiffany stepped forward slightly. I asked for 1 week to pull myself together. Instead, I was locked out of the company account. The words were calm, controlled, which made them worse. Judge Judy turned to Marissa. Is that accurate? Marissa's breathing was shallow now. I had to protect the brand's momentum. From grief? Judge Judy asked. Silence. The audience felt it, that thin, brittle line between ambition and opportunism. Tiffany reached into her folder again, slower this time, not frantic, just resolved. I didn't bring this up before, she said softly, because I didn't want sympathy. She handed over another printed message. Judge Judy read it aloud. You're too emotional to run this. I need someone stable if I'm going to secure funding. The timestamp glowed at the bottom of the page. 3 days after Tiffany's father's funeral. The courtroom went still. Marissa's face shifted, not into remorse, not fully, but into something dangerously close to exposure. That was taken out of context, she whispered. Judge Judy looked up. Everything seems to be taken out of context when it no longer benefits you. The words were surgical. Marissa's shoulders dropped slightly, just enough to show the weight pressing down. This wasn't sabotage, she insisted, weaker now. It was survival. For whom? Tiffany asked. No one answered. Judge Judy leaned forward, folding her hands deliberately. You saw vulnerability, she said slowly, eyes locked onto Marissa. And you interpreted it as weakness. Another silence, and in that silence, something fundamental shifted. The audience no longer saw 2 equal business partners fighting. They saw one person breaking under grief, and another calculating around it. Judge Judy's voice dropped lower. You said earlier, she reminded Marissa, you don't know everything. Her gaze sharpened. So enlighten me. Because whatever Marissa had been holding back, it was about to surface. The silence after Judge Judy's demand was suffocating. So enlighten me. Marissa's lips parted, then closed again. For a moment, it looked like she might finally confess something raw, something human. Instead, Tiffany moved first. There's one more thing, she said. Her voice wasn't shaking anymore. It was steady, almost resigned. She reached into her folder and pulled out a thin stack of printed slides, clean, corporate, unmistakably professional. A pitch deck. Judge Judy accepted it, flipping to the first page. Brand logo, mission statement, projected growth charts. Then her eyes paused. Under founder and CEO was Marissa's photo. Under company background was a single line, founded by Marissa Kane in 2023. No mention of Tiffany, not even in small print. The camera would have zoomed in on Tiffany's face right then. Not anger, not outrage, but something worse. Recognition. When was this presented? Judge Judy asked calmly. 6 months ago, Tiffany replied. Marissa's head snapped toward her. You weren't supposed to see that. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Judge Judy's gaze lifted slowly. 6 months ago, she repeated, while Miss Tiffany was still developing product revisions. Marissa exhaled sharply. It was a preliminary meeting. Judge Judy flipped another page. Revenue projections, scaling plans, expansion timeline. Then the final slide. Exit strategy, under leadership restructuring. Founder retains full equity control. No ambiguity, no collaboration, no partnership. You had already decided, Judge Judy said quietly, that she was expendable. Marissa shook her head, but it lacked force. I was securing leverage. Against whom? Tiffany asked softly. The question wasn't aggressive. It was wounded. Marissa's composure fractured completely now. You don't survive in business by being sentimental, she snapped. I saw what was coming. Investors wanted clarity. They wanted confidence. They didn't want... She stopped again. Didn't want what? Judge Judy pressed. 2 voices, Marissa said finally. They didn't want division. So you erased one. Judge Judy replied. The room went still. Tiffany blinked rapidly, absorbing it. Not the paperwork, not the money, but the timeline. 6 months. 6 months of smiling meetings, 6 months of shared branding shoots, 6 months of being quietly written out of her own creation. Judge Judy leaned forward, her tone no longer investigative, but certain. This was not a misunderstanding. She placed the pitch deck down deliberately. This was premeditated. Marissa's breathing was uneven now. It was strategy, she whispered. Judge Judy's eyes locked onto hers. No, she said calmly. It was betrayal, and in that moment the case stopped being about missing money. It became about something far more damaging, because when ambition replaces loyalty, someone always gets erased, and Judge Judy wasn't finished yet. No one argued this time. The word betrayal had drained the fight out of the room. Marissa stood motionless, eyes fixed somewhere just past the judge's bench, as if staring at a version of herself that no longer held together. The confidence that once carried her through every objection, every deflection, had evaporated. Tiffany didn't look at her. She didn't need to. Judge Judy removed her glasses slowly, folding them with deliberate care. The soft click echoed louder than any raised voice had earlier. In business, she began calmly, there are risks. Her eyes lifted to Marissa. But deception is not a risk, it's a choice. The lighting in the courtroom felt different now, less confrontational, more exposing. There was nowhere left to posture. Marissa swallowed. I never meant to hurt her. Tiffany let out a faint breath, not a laugh, not a sob, something in between. You just meant to replace me, she said quietly. The words didn't spark another explosion, they settled. Judge Judy leaned back slightly. Miss Tiffany, she said, tone measured. Why didn't you secure your ownership legally? Tiffany hesitated, not out of fear, but reflection. Because I trusted her, she said. She was my best friend. The camera would have captured the subtle shift in the audience, empathy rising like a quiet tide. Judge Judy nodded once. Trust, she said, does not eliminate responsibility. Tiffany accepted that. She didn't argue. That mattered. Judge Judy turned back to Marissa. And ambition does not eliminate accountability. Silence again. Marissa's shoulders dipped, the first true sign of weight settling in. Not defensiveness, not outrage, just consequence. You transferred assets, Judge Judy continued, voice steady. You restructured equity without disclosure. You presented sole ownership while accepting her contributions. Each statement landed methodically. You didn't miscommunicate, she added. You concealed. Marissa's eyes flickered, a flash of something close to regret. It got bigger than I expected, she said softly. Investors, contracts, pressure. I thought I could fix it later. Judge Judy's expression didn't change. People always think they can fix it later. A quiet pause. But character is revealed in what you do when no one is looking. The courtroom absorbed that. Tiffany blinked, emotion finally surfacing, not explosive, just raw. I didn't even want full control, she said. I just wanted acknowledgement. Marissa finally looked at her. For the first time that day, there was no rivalry in her expression, only the realization of what she'd destroyed. Judge Judy placed both hands flat on the bench. I've heard enough. The words were calm, decisive. The room straightened instinctively, because when Judge Judy said that, it meant judgment wasn't coming, it was imminent. The words I've heard enough still hovered when Judge Judy straightened in her chair. The courtroom shifted instinctively, like a tide pulling back before impact. Marissa's hands were no longer gripping the table. They hung at her sides now, fingers slightly curled, as if unsure what to hold on to next. Tiffany stood still, shoulders squared, but the exhaustion in her eyes was undeniable. Judge Judy's voice, when it came, wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Let's talk about responsibility. She folded her hands deliberately on the bench. In partnerships, formal or informal, there are fiduciary duties. If one person contributes capital, labor, or intellectual property with the mutual understanding of shared ownership, that creates obligation. Her eyes moved to Marissa. even if you failed to document it properly. Marissa opened her mouth, perhaps to argue technicalities. Judge Judy stopped her with a glance. This court does not reward clever paperwork designed to obscure fairness. The lighting felt almost surgical now. Every shadow defined, every flaw visible. You accepted her money, Judge Judy continued. You accepted her formulation. You allowed her to continue operating under the belief that she was co-founder. A beat. And while she was grieving, you began drafting her exit. The audience didn't murmur this time. They didn't need to. Marissa's voice was smaller now. I thought I was protecting what I built. You protected control, Judge Judy corrected calmly. Not integrity. Tiffany blinked hard, absorbing the words. Judge Judy turned slightly toward her. And you, she said, not unkindly, mistook loyalty for legal protection. Tiffany nodded once. No defense, no denial. That mistake, Judge Judy added, does not entitle someone else to exploit it. The tension in the room had transformed, no longer volatile, no longer chaotic. It was focused. Judge Judy picked up the transfer documents again. Moving assets to a family member during an ownership dispute, she said evenly, signals bad faith. Marissa's jaw tightened, but she didn't interrupt. Presenting sole ownership to investors while accepting undisclosed contributions, Judge Judy continued, is misrepresentation. The word settled heavily. And misrepresentation, she finished, has consequences. The camera would have lingered on Marissa's face, not defiant now, not combative, just exposed. Tiffany closed her eyes briefly, bracing herself. Not for revenge, for finality. Judge Judy placed the papers down with precision. This courtroom, she said quietly, is not a stage for ego. Her gaze sharpened one last time. It is a place where accountability stands under light. The silence that followed wasn't tense, it was inevitable. Judge Judy reached for her gavel, and the entire room held its breath. The gavel didn't fall. Not yet. Judge Judy held it in her hand, suspended. The courtroom caught in that fragile space between decision and consequence. Before I rule, she said evenly, I'll allow brief final statements. The air felt thinner. Tiffany stepped forward first. She didn't look at the audience. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked at the bench. I don't want her company taken away, she said quietly. I don't want revenge. I just want acknowledgement that I built it too, that I mattered. Her voice didn't break, but something in it did. The camera would have caught the subtle shift in the room. Outrage replaced by empathy, not for drama, for dignity. Judge Judy nodded once. Miss Marissa. Marissa hesitated before stepping forward. The sharp confidence from earlier was gone. In its place was something brittle. I did what I thought I had to do, she said. Investors expect clarity, strong leadership. I couldn't risk the brand collapsing because of emotional instability. Tiffany flinched, just slightly. Judge Judy's eyes hardened. Grief is not instability, she said firmly. Marissa swallowed. I worked hard, she continued, softer now. I carried the branding, the legal filings, the pitches. I felt like I was holding everything together. And instead of holding your partner, Judge Judy replied, you cut her loose. Silence. The truth didn't need volume. Judge Judy placed the gavel down, not striking it, just resting it on the bench. Leadership, she said slowly, is not about eliminating perceived weakness. It is about strengthening through it. Marissa's eyes dropped to the floor. Judge Judy turned to the financial breakdown one last time. Based on documented lab payments, documented communications, and bad faith asset transfers, she said calmly, this court recognizes Miss Tiffany's equitable contribution to this company. Tiffany's breath hitched. You will compensate her for her initial capital investment of $22,000, Judge Judy continued, plus 50% of documented net profits prior to asset diversion. A ripple passed through the room. Marissa's head snapped up. And, Judge Judy added, voice sharpening, you will provide a full accounting of funds transferred to the secondary LLC. The lighting seemed brighter now, unforgiving. This court does not reward deception disguised as ambition. Marissa's composure fractured fully, not in tears, not dramatically, but in realization. The brand she tried to protect had cost her something far greater: reputation, trust, character. Judge Judy finally lifted the gavel again. If you were sitting in this courtroom, the narrator's voice would later ask softly, would you call this justice or karma? The pause stretched. And then, the gavel came down. The sound of the gavel didn't echo. It settled, heavy, final. Marissa stood frozen, as if the impact hadn't fully reached her yet. The courtroom lights seemed brighter now, almost unforgiving, illuminating every crack in the polished image she'd walked in with. Judgment for the plaintiff, Judge Judy stated clearly. $22,000 in documented capital investment, 50% of verified net profits prior to asset diversion, full financial disclosure of transferred funds within 30 days. Each sentence was measured, each consequence precise. Tiffany exhaled, not sharply, not dramatically, just a long, quiet breath she'd been holding for months. There was no smile, no victorious glance across the aisle, only relief. Marissa blinked rapidly, processing the numbers, the accounting order, the implication that her sister's LLC would now be scrutinized. This isn't criminal court, Judge Judy added calmly, but if irregularities surface during disclosure, this matter may not end here. The warning was subtle and intentional. Marissa nodded faintly, the fight drained from her posture. For the first time since the chaos erupted, she looked small, not because she lost money, but because she lost narrative control. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair. Ambition, she said, voice steady and deliberate, is not the enemy. Her gaze moved to Marissa. But ambition without integrity collapses under its own weight. Then to Tiffany. And trust without protection invites harm. The lesson wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The bailiff stepped forward. The audience began to stir. Papers shuffled like whispers. Somewhere in the back row, a phone screen glowed, capturing the final seconds of a case that would soon ripple across social media. The viral clip would show the shouting, the lunge, the scream of "call the police." But what it wouldn't show, at least not at first, was this moment, the stillness after exposure. Tiffany gathered her documents slowly. As she turned to leave, she paused, just briefly, beside Marissa. Not to gloat, not to accuse, just to look at her. Marissa didn't meet her eyes, and that somehow said more than anything else. Judge Judy lifted the next case file without ceremony. The machine of justice moved on, indifferent to ego, untouched by performance. But for the two women walking out under the harsh studio lights, nothing was the same. One had regained acknowledgement. The other had learned that control built on concealment eventually fractures. The doors opened. The hallway swallowed them. And inside that courtroom, the lesson lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Power without responsibility destroys partnerships. Image without truth shatters. And arrogance, no matter how polished, always answers to consequence.